If you were to meet one of my students and ask them about our approach, you would find that I spend very little time on test prep. And that's a decision I made many years ago, and I've stuck to it. I think content comes first. I think if you know your content, if you know good economics, you're going to do well on this exam. That said, you're taking time out of your day to watch these videos. Obviously, you are committed to doing well in the exam. Let's take one video, the last one in our series, session number 8. Let's take one video and talk about some strategies that you can use and apply to the AP Macro exam that are a little bit unique to AP Macro. They can probably help in other courses as well, but I think specific to AP Macro, they can help you do well. And my purpose in that is really to help you get to that point that your results on this exam reflect all that work you put in this year. You and your teacher, the time you spent, the hours you devoted to studying this subject. Let's make sure that score that you earn reflects that. So a few tips here in session 8 in our last AP Daily Live video this year to help you out specifically with that exam. That's where we're going today. We're going to talk about some test taking tips. So once again, my name is Matt Romano. I am at Marist School in Atlanta, Georgia. And what are we going to learn today? As I said in the intro, we're going to learn about everything. We're going to take some time out of our day to talk about test taking strategies specific to the types of multiple choice and free response questions that you're going to encounter in AP Macroeconomics. So content wise, it's everything. It's all 6 units. Everything is overlapped. It's not going to be sequential. It's not going to be in order. You've got to be ready for everything. And that's something about the approach that you've got to adapt. You've got to be ready for any topic to come up at any time. In terms of the skills, all skills apply. You're going to have to define, interpret, manipulate principles and models. When it comes to FRQ, drawing them out, actually manipulating them on paper, and then interpreting and explaining what's going on. Every skill that you've learned is applicable here. As far as your approach is concerned, like I said, you know everything is subject to show up, all 6 units. But also know this, expect it to look different from what you've done to this point. And don't be intimidated by that. In other words, expect the unexpected and have confidence in your preparation and your knowledge that you can handle any of it, which you can, as evidenced by the fact that you're doing the work right now. The questions aren't going to be worded exactly like your teacher worded them. They're not going to be exactly like the practice problems you've done. In fact, I take it a step further. Don't go into this trying to make a prediction about what you're going to see on the exam. Just be ready for anything and be ready for the fact that it's going to look a little different from the preparation that you did, with the knowledge and, if anything else, the comfort of it's covering those topics that you have prepared for. And if you can make that connection between these questions you see on the exam and the topics that you know so much about, you're in great shape. And that's what we're going to work on today. Can I make those connections? Can I recognize and identify what topics they're asking me so I can pull from my acquired base of knowledge what I know about AP Macro, leading to a result that really reflects what I have learned? That's where we're going. All right, let's warm up a little bit. Think about the approaches we're going to take in these 2 different arenas. First and foremost, some general advice, and I have to share this with you. I've shared it. If you've seen any other videos I've done on here, I've shared it there from time to time, and I always share this with my students. I have it on the board over here for them to always keep in mind. And number 1, a problem well defined is half solved. You're going to see this in action today. This is really the basis of how we're going to approach both multiple choice and free response questions. Step 1 is define the problem. I didn't come up with this, by the way. I heard this first in a buyer behavior class when I was an undergrad many, many years ago. But if you can define the problem first, if you just read carefully and avoid the temptation to skip ahead to the answers, read questions carefully and actually define what it is the question is asking you, you're halfway home. Now, you're not there yet, but you're halfway home. If you skip that step, you may find yourself floundering. You may find yourself lost. So you don't want to do that. Take the extra couple of seconds to really read questions carefully and define what are they asking me. I'll show you how to do that in just a moment. Second, once you've defined the question, answer the question being asked of you. Don't invent your own question. Don't bring other outside issues into the question. Be as literal as possible. And that's one of the beautiful things about macroeconomics. It's a very literal field. It's a very literal discipline. Determine what the question is. This seems so simplistic, I know. Define what the question is, and then answer that question. Don't answer some other question. We see this all the time when we're grading these exams. Students try to write their own questions, and you don't realize you're doing it at the time, but you wind up answering a question that wasn't asked. So take a few extra seconds and actually make sure you're answering the question that's being asked of you. This is advice going in, but it's also advice for you to keep in mind when you're finished and you go back and you review. Rather than second guessing yourself, just stop and say, okay, did I answer the question that was asked? If you did, put the pen down, you're done. Move on to the next thing, you're good to go. Okay. Let's look at some examples, all right? We're going to start with multiple choice, and we're going to talk about an approach. We're going to talk about a little activity that I do with my classes as well. And then we're going to do it. We're going to do some practice problems, a whole bunch of them, using this template, for lack of a better term, to help you work your way through some example problems from previous tests from AP Classroom. You may have seen some of these already with your teacher working on AP Classroom. So first things first, your approach to multiple choice. It's not the same as it is in other courses. It's certainly not like it would be in a history class. You know, if you've taken a push, if you've taken AP Euro, AP World, yes, they're all social studies, I know that, but the approach is very, very different. The answer is not going to be obvious. Sometimes it will. Every now and then you get a gimme, you get a definitional question and boom, there's the answer. Take the answer and move on. But in many cases, that's not going to be the way it works. Treat it more like a math class. Treat it more like a math question. You're going to have to do a little work to find your answer and be prepared for that. Have a scratch sheet of paper, write in the margins, do whatever you need to do. I tell my students all the time, you shouldn't be turning in a nice clean test. It should be a mess. You should be having have notes written all over this thing, all over your scratch paper, whatever, every time you do multiple choice or free response in AP Macro. You're going to have to do some work. If possible, and we're going to practice this today, this isn't always possible, but if possible, answer the question before you look at the options. You're going to have 5 options, A through E, every time. Many times, you can either answer the question or set yourself up to answer the question before you even look at those options. So try to train yourself to do that. We're going to do that here. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you have to look at the options and work your way through. We'll look at some of those as well. But if at all possible, try to answer the question before you look at the options. That way you know what you're looking for. Makes it a whole lot easier to work through options A, B, C, D, and E. Whenever possible, draw a graph. Draw a graph. These are visuals. They are tools. We didn't learn graphs just so you'd have something to memorize to take up your time. We learned graphs because they're tools that help us understand the world. That's the point. So if at all possible, draw a graph on your paper to help you answer a question. I tell students all the time, it's almost like cheating. It's not cheating, but if you draw the graph accurately, it gives you the answer. That's why we have them. It's to help us understand the world. Use that. Draw graphs all over the place. All right, practice. I promised you some practice. Here's what we're going to do. As we practice, here's what I want you to do. And I'm going to kind of work through this with you. I'm going to give you a question. In many of these, I'm going to cover up the answers. You're not going to see them until we work through a process. I'm going to give you a question. And your first step on every question is to first define what unit it came from, define the topic that's being asked, identify, are there any graphs or formulas that I can use to help me answer this question? Do that for every MCQ, especially as you're practicing it, and get in the habit, because what you're doing when you do this is you're putting yourself back into that place where you learned that content. You're identifying, oh yeah, that's the thing. That's what they're asking me. And you put yourself in the mindset you were in when you learned it the first time. And that's where you need to be. You don't want to just be grasping for things, hoping to find the right answer. You need to reset your mind to, oh, this is a question about short run aggregate supply. So what was that again? And your mind goes there. Reset yourself with every question. I know it's daunting. There's 60 questions on this exam. It can be done. Okay. Some are going to be a whole lot quicker than others. If you practice it this way and you get accustomed to approaching questions this way, this becomes a form of defining the question. And remember, a problem well defined is half solved. So we're going to practice that today as we work through these questions. What unit did it come from? What topic is being addressed? Is there a graph I can use? Is there a formula I can use? That's going to get you halfway home. Then you can approach the answers and say, all right, here's what I need to do. Here's the correct answer. Okay, so all that said, let's practice. I'm going to throw some multiple choice questions at you. With each one, I'll read you the question. We'll take a look at it. I want you to think, what's the unit? What's the topic? Graphs and formulas, any of that kind of stuff. I'll pause, let you answer, and then we'll take a look at the correct answer. Okay, first one out the gate. We have a table. Country A and country B, fish and wheat, 10 labor hours, 20 labor hours, 20 labor hours, 60 labor hours. What are we looking at? Remember, define the problem first. The data above indicates labor hours needed to produce a single unit of two commodities in each of two countries. If labor is the only factor used to produce the commodities, which of the following statements must be correct? Now, question like this, you have the three options. Take each option as it is and determine, is this thing true or not? Is this a possible correct answer? Before even looking at the potential answers. For our practice today, here's what you need to be thinking about. What unit did this come from? What topic are they asking me about? And what do I need in order to answer the question? Okay, jot that down. Pause if you need to, jot that down, and then we'll talk. So this should be obvious. It's straight from unit one. Okay, unit one, comparative advantage. This is a comparative advantage question. Graph reference are needed. Well, there really isn't one. I mean, if you wanted to, you could attach the PPC to this. And it might help you actually if you draw out a PPC and convert some things, but that's pretty tough because they're giving you, it's an input problem. They don't have a set amount of time. You don't have any output data. You could draw a PPC just to visualize, but I don't know, doesn't really fit. Formula reference are needed. Well, you're going to have to calculate opportunity cost. You've got to be able to calculate opportunity cost because we're going to have to make some conclusions, and you know they're going to go to comparative advantage, which means you need to be able to have that available. So when you do that, you go back in and you calculate your opportunity cost. This is what it looks like. The opportunity cost in country A for fish would be half a unit of wheat. And for wheat, it would be 2 units of fish. We know that because in 20 hours, they could have produced 2 units of fish. In 10 hours, they could have produced half a unit of wheat. And for country B, you can see 1/3 of a unit of wheat and 3 units of fish. So just looking at that data, I can go ahead and make some conclusions. Absolute and comparative advantage. Absolute advantage, I'm looking at the labor hours. Country A produces fish. I don't know if you make fish, you produce fish, you produce fish a lot quicker in country A, which means they have absolute advantage. And wheat, 20 is less than 60. They're also producing wheat much quicker than country B. So it looks like country A has absolute advantage in both. Comparative advantage, they can't. Now you look at your opportunity cost. Country B has a lower opportunity cost for fish. They have comparative advantage. Country A has a lower opportunity cost for wheat. They have comparative advantage there. Now I can take that knowledge and apply it to these three options. So one says country A has absolute advantage in production of both commodities. Well, we already established that's true. Comparative advantage in the production of wheat. That is also true. So one has to be part of my answer. 2, country B has country B has absolute advantage in production of, no, it doesn't. As soon as we get there, scratch it. 2 is not true. 2 cannot be part of our answer. Move on to 3. Mutually advantageous trade can occur between 2 countries when 2.5 units of fish are exchanged for 1 unit of wheat. Is that true or not? Well, go to wheat and look at those opportunity costs. Do the terms of trade fall between the opportunity costs? Well, they do. They fall right between them. 2 and 3, 2.5 is right between the two. 3 must be true as well. Now look at your options. Okay, we have that in mind. We know that 1 and 3 are true. Therefore, working our way through them, you can eliminate 4. 1 and 3 are true. D is your answer. Okay. Good way to approach those questions. Again, define the topic, define the question, work your way through, then look at your options. All right, let's do another one. Gross domestic product has been criticized as a measure of well-being because it fails to take into account which of the following. Okay, again, where did we learn this? When did we learn this in our curriculum? GDP. That's a unit 2 topic. Graph reference are needed. There isn't one. Formula reference are needed. There really isn't one. This is the definitional question. I mentioned that earlier, that you're going to get some definitional questions from time to time. There's not a whole lot you can do. There's no visuals that you can grasp to help. This is talking about how we approach GDP. What I would recommend is, with a question like this, again, answer it before you look at the options. How is GDP criticized when it comes to measuring well-being? Well, let's talk about that for a moment. GDP doesn't measure well-being. It's not designed to measure well-being. Why not? GDP is purely a measure of output. How much has been produced? It doesn't tell us how happy we are. It doesn't tell us how well off we are. And it certainly doesn't tell us how much income is distributed, or how equitably income is distributed among a society. So we need to keep all that in mind. We need to go ahead and recall that before we look at the answers, because something within there is going to be the correct answer. So jot those down, have them in mind. Now, look at what they've given you. A, distribution of income. B, value of services. C, value of intermediate goods. D, value of financial transactions and sales of used items. Or E, the value of government services. One of those is the correct answer. The other four obviously are not. Take a second and determine. Okay, this one should be obvious. Like I said, it's a definitional question. We don't get a lot of these. So when we do, we need to take full advantage of it. And if we just think through the definition of GDP, obviously we know B, C, D, and E are not correct. The criticism comes from the fact that GDP tells us nothing about the distribution of income within a society. Therefore, it doesn't tell us anything about well-being. Very common question, actually. All right, let's try another one. Suppose a typical consumer buys the following quantities of 3 commodities in 1993 and 1994. So here we have a table. Clearly, just in first glance, we can tell that we have a basket of goods, 3 goods: food, clothing, and shelter. We have consistent quantities, and we have varying prices. Right then, your brain should go straight to Unit 2 and straight to CPI and market baskets of goods. Question says, which of the following could be concluded about the consumer price index for this individual from 1993 to 1994? All right, so we need to do some calculations. Once again, what unit, what topic, what formulas do we need? This is a Unit 2 question, pretty obvious. We're talking about price indices, inflation. There's not a graph we can use here. We didn't have any graphs in Unit 2, if you recall, but there is a formula. We need to make sure we can construct a price index and that we can calculate percent change, because that's what we're talking about when it says what was the change, what can be concluded about the CPI from 93 to 94. Now, you may have to take it a step further and look at the options here. I'm going to keep them covered up for now, but you may have to look at the options before you can actually construct your response and really think, what are they asking me? I know where it's going, so I've jumped ahead here. Let's go ahead and construct the market basket price and then see what we can do with it. So doing that, in 1993, we should find that the market basket price is $80. Okay, you're buying 5 units of food, 2 units of shelter, 2 units of clothing, 3 units of shelter. That comes out to $80. When you jump ahead to 94, you're spending $100. Now, they don't give us a base year. They're not asking us to calculate the CPI itself. They're asking, what can we conclude about the CPI given the data in the table? Well, the one conclusion I can definitely make is there's a 25% change in the market basket of goods, which equates to a 25% change in the consumer price index, the CPI. That I can get before I even look at the options. I can make that conclusion and know what I'm looking for before I look at these 4 options. Now it becomes that much easier. I know that the CPI is going to go up by 25% because the value of the basket went up by 25%. Can't be A, can't be B, can't be C, can't be D. Answer has to be option E. The CPI is increased by 25%. Again, know what you're looking for. Use your formulas. When necessary, use a graph. Here, this was a formula question. Use your formulas, know what you're looking for. Whole lot easier to use process elimination with the answers once you've done that. All right, next question. Aggregate demand may be measured by adding. Oh boy, when did we do aggregate demand? It seems like we've known it forever. Aggregate demand was a Unit 3 topic. Graph reference are needed. Well, I could be thinking in terms of ADAS. Now this is asking about measurement of aggregate demand, so I'm not really going to use the graph, but again, it doesn't hurt to put yourself there again. Put yourself where you learned it, put yourself in the context of aggregate demand. So it's the ADAS model. Formula needed. AD is C plus I plus G plus NX. We know that. That's what you're going to have to be looking for when we reveal the answers. So here are your possible answers. Go ahead and pause, read those, and determine what the correct answer is. Okay. When I've written down AD equals C plus I plus G plus NX, this becomes a gimme. There's really nothing to it. Is it consumption, investment, savings? No. Savings, government spending, and business inventories? No. Domestic private expenditures, government? No. Domestic expenditures, import? No. There it is, option C, CIGNX. Again, I know that's a simple question. You're going to get more challenging questions on the exam, but the approach helps, and that's what I'm trying to teach you here. There's an approach that you can take that puts yourself in that place that leads it to a much simpler process when it comes to actually answering the question. All right. If government simultaneously engages in expansionary monetary and fiscal policies, which of the following is the effect on interest rates and unemployment? Okay, so once again, we need to answer for interest rates, then we need to answer for unemployment. Put yourself back into that place. What topics are we talking about? We're again in Unit 5. We're talking fiscal and monetary policy combinations. And a lot of times it's that topic that does have these 2 or 3 column questions. Graph reference are needed. Now imagine that. There are 3 graphs I could use to help me answer this question. Formulas, there aren't any formulas. We're not dealing with any data here, but 3 graphs that could help me. So think through those first, especially as it pertains to interest rates and then unemployment. So on the interest rate side, money market. If you're in a money market graph, okay, and you have expansionary monetary, expansionary fiscal policy, what's going to happen? Well, the most direct response would be that in the money market, money supply is going to increase, causing a decrease in interest rates. However, in the loanable funds market, there's going to be an increase in demand for loanable funds because of the expansionary fiscal policy. Remember, deficit spending leads to crowding out. The increase in demand for loanable funds is going to increase interest rates. That means I don't know what's going to happen to interest rates with this specific combination. So looking at that first column there, the column for interest rates, right off the bat, I can eliminate A, I can eliminate B, I can eliminate C, because I just don't know. Interest rates are indeterminate because you have contradictory effects on the fiscal and monetary policy side. Okay, now it's 50-50. Which one is correct? I know the interest rates are indeterminate. What's going to happen to unemployment? That's when I go to ADAS. On the ADAS model, I will have an increase in aggregate demand. That's going to happen. AD is going to shift to the right. That's going to lead to an increase in output. That's going to lead to a decrease in unemployment. You can eliminate E. Your correct answer is D. Again, work your way through sequentially, but use the tools available to you. If there's a reference to a certain graph, use it. Draw the graph if you need to. Use the tools available to you. That's what they were for, not just for an exam, but for understanding the world out there. Next question. This one's going to provide us with a graph, so we don't even have to think about it from the start. The economy of a country is currently in equilibrium at point A in the diagram above. If the government does nothing and wages are flexible, which of the following will most likely occur in the long run? All right, so what is this question asking me? Where are we in the curriculum? Well, they gave us ADAS, but look at the wording down here. If the government does nothing and wages are flexible, which of the following will most likely occur in the long run? What topic are they asking me? This is Unit 3. This is long run self-adjustment. And this is a topic that comes up pretty frequently. And we need to always identify it initially so that I know where to go with it. Remember this, when it comes to long run self-adjustment, we're saying there's no policy action happening. They're not stepping in with expansionary, contractionary, fiscal, monetary, none of that. We're not even dealing with automatic stabilizers at this point. There's no policy having an impact. What happens? We tell the same story every time. There's going to be an adjustment of resource prices, specifically wages, but it can go beyond that. And that's going to lead to a shift of SRAS. That's the long run self-adjustment mechanism every time. So if I can identify that that's what they're asking me, it makes it that much easier to solve the problem. Again, don't even look at the options. What's going to happen? Well, we're sitting here at point A. We have a recessionary gap. With long run self-adjustment, what happens? Resource prices fall. You have idle resources. You're operating below full employment. There are idle resources. People are out of work. People might even accept lower wages. So with those reduced wages, with those reduced resource prices, SRAS is going to shift back to the right. That's going to close your output gap and take you back to full employment output. Where's that answer down here? Well, part A says falling wages shift aggregate demand. Nope, that can't be it. Aggregate demand is not going anywhere. Wages don't impact aggregate demand. Part B, or option B, rising. Nope, wages are not rising. Drop that one. That can't be it. The economy will remain at point A. No, we know that's not going to happen. This is self-adjustment. We're going back to full employment in the long run. And that's what that phrase there means. D, rising wages will shift. No, we know that wages aren't going to go up here. We're operating below full employment. You have a high degree of unemployment, high degree of cyclical unemployment. Not going to happen. Part E, let's confirm. Falling wages will shift the aggregate supply curve to the right, producing full employment. That's exactly right. That tells the story. That's long run self-adjustment. There's your answer. Again, put yourself back into that place. Where did you learn it? What topic are we talking about? It's going to make it that much easier to find your answer. All right. Another definitional question here. Which of the following would be a current account transaction? Current, what in the world? Oh, current account. When did we learn that? Probably right at the end of the year. That's a Unit 6 topic. Okay, we're talking balance of payments accounts. Graph, there's no graph for this, but formula, not really a formula so much because it's a definitional question, but it's helpful to keep in mind CA plus CFA equals 0. Maybe they're going to go there. Probably not. What I would recommend, and again, maybe jot this down on the side, define the current account. This is a definitional question. Have the definition in front of you before you go and do the answer, go and find the answer. Same was true when we had the aggregate demand question earlier, when we had the GDP question earlier. So what is the current account? We know it's part of the balance of payments accounts. What transactions are recorded there? Net exports, net income from abroad, net unilateral transfers. So I know what I'm looking for. Now go through your 5 options. Okay, so look through your 5 options and say, okay, is each of these recorded on the current account? Option A, India buys $10 billion of new United States Treasury bonds. No, that's a capital and financial account transaction. They're purchasing financial assets. That doesn't go on the current account. Get rid of it. B, United States firm buys 5% of stock of another United States firm. Well, for 2 reasons, it's not going to count. Get rid of that one. For one, it's a financial asset. 2, it's not even international, so it doesn't count. C, a United States firm builds a new factory in Kenya. Is that going to count? No, it's not going to count. That's foreign direct investment. Does not count on the current account. That goes on your capital and financial account. D, United States firm sells $500 million of its products to a Chinese company. Can I find that down here in my definition? I can. That eliminates E because the $8 billion worth of euros goes on the capital and financial account. Part D would be net exports, exports specifically. That's going to be recorded on your current account. Again, work your way through sequentially, but have a definition in mind. Know what you are looking for. If you define the problem first, you're halfway home. And that's what we want to do. Okay. Give yourself a better chance to find the correct answer. Okay. Those were multiple choice. Let's shift gears a little bit. Let's think about the FRQ. Let's think about free response questions and what kind of an approach we want to take, because it is a little bit different. There's some things we can carry over from the multiple choice, but we do need to take a slightly different approach because it is free response. It's wide open. All right, so FRQs. First things first, read carefully. Again, this is carryover. Define the problem, define the question. What are they asking me to do? That first sentence in the prompt is going to tell you something that you need to know. It's going to set the tone. It's going to establish the conditions present in this scenario. FRQs are really intended to tell a story, and you want to approach it as such. What story are we telling, and where are we starting? That first sentence or couple of sentences, that's going to set the tone for you, and it's going to include some really important information that you need to have in mind throughout the question. It might have some distractors as well, so be careful, but you don't know that at that point. So as you're reading that first little prompt, whether it's a sentence, 2 sentences, a small paragraph, table, graph, whatever they give you, write down, jot down, highlight, make a note of what they're telling you, because you're going to need that information somewhere as you're responding and giving your answer to this FRQ. So read carefully. Don't just blow right past that first sentence. It's not random. It matters. Recognize the topics asked, just like you did with the multiple choice, just like we just practiced. Recognize what they're asking you. Put yourself back into that place mentally so that you can accurately respond and remember, oh yeah, that's when we learned this. This is from unit 3. It doesn't matter that you remember the unit, but the topic itself. If you put yourself back into that place, you're going to be in much better shape. Keep this in mind, however, it's not going to be just one unit. It's not going to be just one topic. There will be multiple topics and typically multiple units on each FRQ. So we have to adjust accordingly. What else? Make your grader happy. Now, this sounds silly, but your writing answers are going to be graded a few weeks later by someone who's not your teacher. You want to be as clear as possible with your responses. Okay, and that means both in terms of the physical paper itself, but also in how you write your answers, how you draw your graphs. So let's just think about a few things that are going to help you, again, do what you're capable of doing on this exam. Be brief, be consistent. If you contradict yourself, you're going to lose points. Okay, we're looking to see what you know. We want to see what points you earned through your responses. You can talk yourself into an incorrect response. In other words, it's possible to give the correct answer and then keep talking, contradict yourself, and lose a point. Don't do that. Be brief. Okay. On that note, quantity does not equal quality. I know that in some cases, in some subjects, you may feel that way. I don't know if that's true there or not. Here, not necessarily. You have to be thorough. And we'll talk about what that means to be thorough. But just writing a whole lot doesn't necessarily do you any good. In fact, it probably increases your odds of contradicting yourself and losing points. So get to the point. Answer the question being asked. Once you've done it, pen down, walk away. Keep your responses as short as possible. I think I'm being a little repetitive here, I know, but hopefully you're getting the point. Complete sentences are not required. Yeah, they're nice, but you don't have to write incomplete sentences. We're not checking for grammar. As a matter of fact, flowcharts are acceptable, sometimes encouraged. If you don't want to write out long sentences, long paragraphs, you just want to get to the point, use a flowchart. For example, what if you have a question that's trying to make a connection between a change in interest rates and a change in employment? Write it out like this. A decrease in interest rates leads to an increase in investment spending, leads to an increase in aggregate demand, output increases leading to an increase in employment. Practice that. Don't let the day of the test be the first time you've tried this, but that is acceptable. And sometimes it's, like I said, encouraged. Sometimes it's even better than trying to write out a sentence, trying to write out a paragraph. So keep that in mind. We want to be as brief as possible. You have to be thorough, but you want to be as brief as possible. Get to the point. Hey, this is economics. We're all about efficiency, right? Be efficient with your words. Be efficient with how you answer questions. You don't need to write an essay. In fact, please don't write an essay. All right, other things to make your grader happy, use ink. You're supposed to use ink on these, use ink. I know that's daunting. You're worried about drawing a graph and being perfect. It's okay. Draw big graphs. You have a lot of space, you have a lot of paper in the booklet, draw big graphs. If you're wrong, guess what? Be gloriously wrong. That's what I tell students all the time. Big, confident graphs. I know what I'm talking about. Look at this ADAS model, it's huge. Draw big graphs because it's easier to see what you've done. It's easier for your grader to know what's going on and for you to communicate what it is you know so you can give the correct answer. If possible, and it's not always possible, answer sequentially. Skip lines if at all possible. Sometimes you can't, but again, in the sake of clarity and making it clear, here's my answer, do that. If possible, and it's not always possible, circle your answer. If it's a calculation, you can circle your answer. Of course, you have to show your work, know that, but you can circle your final answer to make it clear what you're trying to communicate. Don't circle an entire sentence. That doesn't really help anyone. Finally, and this may be the most important part of the whole thing when it comes to FRQs, know and follow your AP Econ verb prompts. What does that mean? In these questions, you're going to be prompted to do things. You have to actually do something. The prompts are telling you what to do. Follow those directions. Here are the directions. Here are the verb prompts. First one, identify what, which, will. Any of those verbs can be used. When they are, you're providing a specific answer. You're really just asserting a specific answer. Up, down, increase, decrease, right, left, whatever. You can just write out a list. You can maybe label on a graph, but you don't need to explain. You don't need to elaborate. These can be one-word answers, okay? You don't have to explain it if it says identify, if it says what, which, will. You run the risk of saying too much when you explain on an identification question, on an assertion question. Okay, so if it doesn't tell you to explain, you don't have to. Be careful with that. Calculate. That's pretty obvious, right? You're going to be working with numbers. Use mathematical operations to determine specific numerical response and show your work. You have to show your work. Okay, if it says calculate, you must show your work. A little note here, if the question is asking for a percent change, make sure you include times 100 within your formula. I'm bad about that. I forget to do it all the time. Make sure you put times 100 so that the expression that you write is actually true. Okay. All right. Show, label, plot, indicate, any of these verbs, any of these terms, they're telling you to use a graph and they're telling you to do something on that graph. Make sure that everything is labeled correctly. Okay. ACE, axes, curves, equilibrium. You've got to label those correctly every single time. And then finally, explain. This is a biggie. This can be tough, but when that word explain comes up, what do you have to do? You've got to walk the reader, walk the grader through all the steps, all the linkages in some line of reasoning. Okay. What I really try to boil it down to is you've got to illustrate some causal relationship. What was the cause of this thing that happened within the question? So you've got to demonstrate that on your question. You've got to bring something to the table. You can't just restate the question. You can't just tell us what the graph said. You've got to bring something from outside in. Tell us what actually happened. Don't just restate. In fact, there's really never a good opportunity or never an appropriate opportunity to restate the question. It's not necessary. We know what the question is. You tell us the answer. So you've got to bring something to the table that indicates this causal relationship. What caused employment to go up? What caused interest rates to fall, or whatever else it happens to be? Okay, so bring something there. And then finally, graphs can be used. The word explain, you don't have to draw a graph, and a graph's not going to be your complete answer, but if you want to reference a graph, you may do that. So you can include a graph as part of your explanation, but you need to also write out an explanation. Okay, there we go. Let's practice this a little bit. Let's start by defining the problem, define the question. What are they asking me? Pick out any relevant information, and then take a minute or two to answer the question, and we'll look at your responses. Assume that a country's economy is currently operating below full employment. Well, this is a shorter question. They didn't give us a lot to work with, but I want to know that. I want to know that we're operating below full employment. We have a recessionary gap. Again, that brings more stuff to mind you might want to jot down. With a recessionary gap, output below full employment, that also means unemployment is elevated, greater than natural rate of unemployment. Okay. Go on and answer parts A, B, and C, and then we'll take a look at the scoring guidelines. All right, I'm going to assume you have done the work. Now we can look at the scoring guidelines, starting with part A. Identify a fiscal policy action the country's government could implement to restore full employment. So the question really is saying, and sometimes you just have to interpret, what would be the appropriate fiscal policy from a recessionary gap? Part A, state the country could implement one of the following fiscal policy actions: increase government spending, increase transfer payments, or decrease taxes. Any of those three, you just have to state one of them, gives you the first point, 1 out of 5 points right there. Part B, draw a correctly labeled graph of the loanable funds market. Show the effects of the fiscal policy action identified in Part A on the equilibrium real interest rate. So first point, draw a correctly labeled graph of the loanable funds market. So I've got to have interest rates on the y-axis, quantity of loanable funds on the x, upward sloping supply, downward sloping demand, and of course, show your equilibrium. That's a point. Once again, free points if you just know how to draw your graphs. Know how to draw your graphs. For the second point, the graph must show a rightward shift in the demand for loanable funds or a leftward shift in supply of loanable funds, resulting in an increase in equilibrium real interest rate. So there are alternate explanations here. You can increase demand or decrease supply, but you have to show the resulting increase in real interest rates. If you didn't show the change in real interest rates with the little dotted lines back to each axis, back to the y-axis, you don't get that point. So make sure you show everything. You've got to be thorough in your explanations. All right, that's 3 of the 5 points right there. Now move on to part C. Assume a country's economy is currently operating below full employment based solely on the real interest rate change shown in part B. Okay, recall what that was. Interest rates went up. What will happen to each of the following? Net exports, explain. The stock of physical capital, explain. So for the first point on C, state that net exports will decrease and Explain the increase in the real interest rate will increase demand for the country's currency, which will cause the country's currency to appreciate and make domestic goods relatively more expensive than foreign goods, thereby decreasing exports. That's a lot, but you can see how they're proving causation. They're taking you through those relevant steps to prove causation to explain their answer. And that's what an explanation has to do. It doesn't have to be very long, but you have to connect the dots. You have to make connections from one concept to the next. For part C2, state the stock of physical capital will decrease. Explain the increase in real interest rate will discourage investment spending in physical capital. Again, connect the dots. How do I connect, in this case, the change in real interest rates to stock of physical capital? You've got to go through investment. All right, those are your final 2 points for number 2, and those are all 5 points for question number 2. What should we take away? The approaches to AP macro are different. It's not the same. So it was worth taking one video to really consider how do we approach MCQs and FRQs in this subject as opposed to other subjects. To summarize, and again, there was more to this, obviously, when it comes to multiple choice, answer the question first, okay? Don't go straight to the A through E responses. Answer the question by putting yourself back into that unit, back into that topic, then look at A through E, see what you can eliminate and narrow down the correct answer. For FRQs, follow your verb prompts. If you follow the directions, you're going to be in great shape. That's not everything. There's more to it than that. You have to know your content, but follow your verb prompts. They're going to lead you in the right direction. They're going to get you to the correct response. Ultimately, though, what does it come down to? Start by defining the problem. A problem well defined is half solved. Then answer the question being asked. This is advice for starting. This is advice for reviewing. When you go back over your work, don't second guess. Don't ask yourself, is that really the right answer? Simply say, did I answer the question? Did I answer the question that was asked? And if you did, you're done. Walk away. You've done a great job, and the grade should reflect what you know. All right, AP Macro students, I want to thank you for viewing these AP Daily Live videos. I want to thank you for the work, the hard work you put in. I want to thank your teachers for the hard work they put in. And I want to wish you well as you go on to take this AP Macro exam. You're going to do great. You're putting in the work. Just go in there with confidence in the work you have done. Believe in yourself and see what happens. With that, I thank you and have a great day. Best of luck.